Hi everyone, and welcome to the Creative Cast. My name is Lucas Homan, and we're back with another episode. This week we have a portrait photographer tuning in from LA. He brings a ton of experience with him. He has been a photo editor for quite a long time, working for magazines. He is an ambassador for big names like Westcoast Lighting and B&H, producing educational content for photographers. He has worked with big, well-known celebrities like Morgan Freeman, John Cena, Vladimir Klitschko, Conor McGregor, The Rock. I'm excited to talk with you. We got Ian Spanier with us. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Good to be here.
All right, let's start off with getting to know you better. Would you mind sharing with us a bit of your background and how you became a photographer?
Sure. So I've had a camera since I was 6, but I pretty much did everything I could to not be a photographer most of my life. And the reason I say that is that I played soccer growing up and into college. I loved sports medicine. I loved the idea of fixing your body when you break it. I had a lot of injuries in high school and into college. And I originally went to school to study sports medicine, thinking that I would be a trainer for like a pro sports team, something along those lines. I thought I'd play soccer, as you call it, football, for 4 years, and ended up only playing 1 year, got hurt a bunch. And even though I was volunteering in the training room, I was keeping my grades up by taking art classes. Because I figured out, because I draw and I paint, that I could always get, closer to an A in class if I took one of these easier courses, whereas biology was killing me in college for some reason, even though I was very good at it in high school. So it just so happened that at some point I started enjoying my time in the darkroom more than my time in the training room. And obviously we shot film back then. And then soon after that, I'm from New York, and I was living in New York City each summer and during winter breaks. And I just happened to get a program through school where I assisted 2 photographers in New York and basically just was ensconced in the art world in New York City. And that 10-week experience really sort of changed my viewpoint. And I started to really feel like I wanted to do something in photography instead. The following, I think, summer, I did an internship at GQ magazine. And that's when I was exposed to photo editing. And photo editing at that time, now people call Photoshop photo editing. I don't know why, but I don't get that one. But photo editing to me is the job of being a producer for the photo shoots of the magazine. And basically it was a lot different, I think, in the 90s and into early 2000s than it is today. And now that I'm on the other side and I work for those people. But at that time, it was very, very hands-on. I would be choosing the photographers. I would be directing them as to the voice of the magazine and what I wanted from them for the photo shoot. And I really just found myself in a position where I felt, or I believed, and I told myself that I was better at assigning and looking at photography than I was at doing it myself. I went back to college, didn't want to really stay in college because once I got that taste of the real world, I really just wanted to just dive in and go ahead and just be a part of that, especially New York City at that time was such an exciting place to be at that age and all that. And I was fortunate that when I did finish, I did want to finish school because I do believe that you should finish things you start. But I was fortunate that Condé Nast, which is the parent company to GQ magazine, was able to bring me back after I graduated. And it took a few months to open a position, but once they were able to do it, I ended up back at GQ magazine working there again.
Seems like they like
I wasn't there, but yeah, they did like me, which was good. Yeah. I wasn't there but 2 weeks. And we had a change in a book review that was happening. And, because it was pre-digital, things didn't happen as quickly as they do now. So the assignments, you'd have to assign it. The photographer would shoot film and then the film would go to the lab. And, if it was a rush, they would have to pay rush fees and so on and so forth. And because this happened at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, we barely had time to call a photographer. And I just went ahead and volunteered and said, hey, I could take this book home and photograph it and bring it back in the morning and we can run with it. And my boss was like, okay, yeah, let's try it. So I went to the art store. I bought a piece of white paper. I didn't even own any lights. I had one small speed light. Didn't even own a stand. I had a tripod and that was it. So I put the camera on a tripod. I held the speed light in my hand and I would flash it and then close my eyes to see the shadow, like how when you look at a bright light and then you see it after you close your eyes. So I would keep closing my eyes until I saw where the shadow landed until it got to the position I wanted. So then with a cable release, I would release the camera and the flash would go off. And that began a 6-year still life photography career. And so as a photo editor, people began to know me as a photo editor who also did photography. And it started to go with me. And as I moved around, my focus was still to be a photo editor. However, the photography started to come along with it. And I always wanted it as a hobby. I didn't necessarily want it as a career. But as time went on, and at that age, kind of rising a little too quick, a little too young, I kind of outgrew my position. And I was a director of photography at 26 years old at Marie Claire magazine. So here I am assigning all these major photo shoots and then on the side shooting a bunch of photo shoots and starting to get more and more attention around the company and getting some acknowledgement from some of the higher ups, which was really, nice. And there was a fashion editor who basically liked my work, I guess. And she told the creative director she wanted me to do a celebrity story. Did that celebrity story, and then things really started to take off and people were assigning me from other magazines and the magazines I worked for. And it was an interesting balance. But then I got to a place where I really found that the assignments that I was giving to photographers, no matter how good I thought I was at directing them and giving them all the background information and all the sort of the voice, as I call it, of a magazine and all that information so that they could do their best job, I would get very frustrated when they failed because I knew I could do it. And I was teaching myself, medium and large format cameras. I was teaching myself lighting at that point because we didn't do anything in college to that degree. And at that stage, I really just found that I'd rather shoot it because it was sort of a, with the better photographers, you pretty much were, 80 or 90% chance that they would do a good job, no matter what the assignment was. With your sort of mid-level photographers at that time, it was very 50-50. Whereas my argument was, well, I'm on the inside. I understand this magazine. It was something I was always good at. I mean, I'm a very regular guy and here I am working at Marie Claire magazine. I don't know anything about fashion in that way. I don't know anything about women in that way. And yet I can understand the voice of the magazine by looking at it. So because those chances were higher of a successful photo shoot, if the guy on the inside was doing it, I would start to make that argument to the people I worked for saying, you're hiring me as a photo editor and I can produce these photo shoots with anything from, lions to presidents of the United States. But now you also have a guy that can photograph whatever's in front of me as well, whether it's a still life, a travel story, a portrait, a, documentary story, any of those things. But, like I said, I sort of outgrew the position at that point because I was seeing that I'd rather shoot and I'd rather be out of the office and I didn't want to sit at a desk and all those other things came about. So long and the short, at that point, I moved to LA because I really wanted people in New York to sort of forget about me. I thought it would take a couple of years. It took all of 2 weeks. People were just out of sight, out of mind. And I didn't like LA the first time I moved here. And so I was back in New York in less than 2 years. And at that point, I really told people I was a photographer and that was it. I wasn't photo editing. I did have the good fortune of working for a media company that put out originally 2 magazines and then they grew to 5 magazines. And I was their chief photographer. I pitched them the idea of bring me in as the chief photographer. That'll be my title. I will still produce photo shoots that I can't do. But primarily I'll be here to photograph, 80% of the magazine. It's going to save you money. I'll show you how. I know how to run the budgets, all that stuff. So I had this interesting, scenario because I understood one side of the business. And then I understood being on the outside, being a photographer. So that combination was kind of a nice 1-2 punch. And then because of the recession, that company went out of business. At that point, we had 3 photographers. I brought in 2 of my assistants, and the 3 of us would photograph, 85 to 90% of the magazines that were there. All very low budget, but meant to look like high budget photo shoots. So it was a good training period because I learned to do a lot with a little, taking one light and creating a look that could be Vanity Fair or GQ or any of those places in these magazines with these tiny art budgets. And I've taken that experience and that time period to, propel my career the whole time, because it put me in a position where no matter the size of the production, I had a solution. And that's really what that's a great segue into what I do, because I don't look at photo shoots as, what's the problem today? It's really what's the challenge and how can I overcome this challenge?
That's, 2 things. Well, the last thing is that, as you said, managing to create the image that is desired with the least amount of equipment possible, it really makes you become a better professional in that sense. And it makes you, so much more confident that you're going to rock every project, right?
100%. If you walk in knowing that you have solutions, when those challenges are thrown at you, you're calm, cool, collected, and that gets sort of emulated in your photo shoots, and people understand. And my, the crew that I always surround myself with, they're all very chill people. I don't like high maintenance drama. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't watch drama on TV, none of that. I'm all about, it's no problem, man. We can do it.
Yeah.
Throw something at me. It's okay. Yeah. We'll figure it out. There's always a way to do it. And that philosophy has really propelled itself into my photography career as I pushed and pushed, because my mentality really is this, notion of a bag of tricks. And I keep this bag of tricks on me at all times, where I can change gears. I can say, oh, well, all our equipment is stuck under the plane and it didn't make it to the photo shoot. How are we going to accomplish this photo shoot? I was told I have 2 hours with somebody, and instead I've got 2 minutes. What am I going to do in 2 minutes that I was planning to do in 2 hours? And, I've sort of built this into this backbone of my career where that's how I approach everything. I love to go in with a plan. And if that plan fails, I have already eliminated one thing and it's out of my way. And now I can move forward, as opposed to a lot of photographers who I saw when I was photo editing, who would get to a photo shoot and, it was supposed to be a sunny day and then it's a stormy day, and they've got no solution on how they're going to get the job accomplished. One of the biggest things I saw when I was photo editing was this thing where some photographers on a shoot would have a problem and they'd call the magazine and say, well, this is what's happening. And I would be sitting at my desk and saying, I'm 3,000 miles away from you. How am I supposed to help you figure out what to do when you're there? You're there as a representation of the magazine. You're there to solve the day for me. Mm-hmm. And so I took that very much to heart. And as a photographer, I don't ever make that phone call. I always figure out, here's how we're going to solve it.
Yeah. And that is very valuable. And that oftentimes I feel like really sets the difference between, a very high value professional photographer from, as you called it, a mediocre one.
Definitely.
Well, at least that's one of the key aspects, there's a difference there. Well, I also noticed, speaking of photo editing, is that you came, right? You started as a photo editor, right? So you trained your eye before you trained light and the equipment and the photography sort of classical sense. But you trained your eye.
Yeah, to a degree.
What looks better than what?
Yes. I'd put it this way, because I always had a camera, I was in the darkroom in high school. I was aware of the equipment. I didn't know lighting. I didn't know strobe. We didn't do anything with lighting in college. We had a couple of, I don't know if you have Home Depot where you are, but a couple of $5 Home Depot lights. They were just the metal casing and a light bulb. And that's all we had in college, so that was it, Yeah. But that one experience I had where I worked for the two photographers, which was pretty much my only assisting experience. I got exposed to strobe photography and was like, wow, we could do this. And, now the equipment's, forget about it. There's so much more possible than there was back then. But really, yes, I would attribute that period of college where I was very much into going to art galleries and studying the masters of photography, your Richard Avedons, your Bresson, Weston, Steichen, Stieglitz. Those are the people who I really admired. And I took that sort of college experience. And then when I went into photo editing, and even now as a photographer, I'm still always going back to that stuff. There was certain contemporary photographers whose work I love and I love to look at. And of course, Instagram makes that, super easy to see the people who you want to emulate or the people who you admire's work. But I constantly go back to the masters. That's who trains me. That's where the true vision to me comes from. And the inspiration comes from there. I actually posted about this today on Instagram, how I'll always take the classics over the flash in the pan. And what I mean by that is, there are trends in photography that happen all the time. And it's up to me, I guess, to a certain degree, or up to the viewer to a certain degree, to decipher what is the trending look that photographers are doing right now versus what's a classic way to do a portrait? What's a classic way to have an image that could be timeless? And that's always the stuff I sort of navigate towards because the flash in the pan things, they literally are flash in the pan for a reason. They last for a few months or a couple of years, but really don't stick around. I would rather have this sense of longevity where the images that I create hopefully are things that people will look at years from now and still look at and say, no matter what the technology, no matter what the equipment used, this, that, or anything else, that's still a good image or a great image. That's my end goal all the time, because I still look back at those masters and say, wow, they had so much less. And that's an amazing image. It stops me in my tracks every single time. I never get tired of looking at it. And that's always something that I want to sort of strive towards, more so than, throwing some gels because everybody's using gels right now, or, shooting with a ring flash because everybody's shooting the ring flash right now. Like, I don't care about that kind of stuff. I want classic. I want timeless. Okay.
I hear hashtag know your basics. There are
know your masters. Yeah. Know your masters.
I like that. I mean, I had to, I've looked through your work and, I've seen resembled very clearly to masters in that sense in some of your work. I've seen Richard Avedon for sure, and I've seen also Irving Penn, in some of your projects as well.
Thank you. I mean, that's the goal right there. Yeah,
it really is. I mean, it's literally one of them is called Penn something like.
I think it was the vintage enthusiast that I photographed. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Pen inspired, I think it was.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so
yeah.
No, but fair enough. It's a good way to say, look, this is not meant to be copying, but this is inspiring. This is like an homage in some sort.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a distinct line between copying and paying homage to a style. You want to bring your own thing to it. And again, it just so happens I just posted this today, but the mentality really is that it's okay to emulate your heroes, but then you also need to bring your voice and create your style. And it's something I struggled with as a young photographer because, and still do a bit today. I'm pretty good at copying what other people have done, and it's hard to be original anymore. And as time went on, I started to gain some confidence in the idea that there's a cohesive thread that goes through my work. And that thread is lighting. That no matter the situation, no matter the subject matter, I have a lighting solution for it. And that's really where I've sort of grown into these shoes, into a career that I've wanted to sort of control very much, because what do photographers do? We try to control things. And really what I wanted was people to understand that if you like my work, you like it because there's a lighting solution to all my work. Mm-hmm. And whether my subject is a musician or a celebrity or a kidney donor, mm-hmm. I have a way to light them that helps tell that story. And that lighting is the thread that helps push that story forward.
Yeah, sure. You also build your own style with a certain look, with a certain feel, right? Obviously.
Yes. I know that I'm not, a David LaChapelle. I don't have a very distinct style that everybody can walk down the street and say, boom, that's David Chappelle. You know that. I wish to a certain degree I had been that, but there's some things that are out of your control. Yes. The contemporaries that I, still again look back and back and back at all the time are people like Albert Watson, because his lighting is just so amazing. Mm-hmm. And here's a guy who sort of shows that same idea. He's a photographer at the end of the day. Most of his work is in that portrait arena, and then he spread into fashion a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then his most recent projects are landscapes, and they're amazing. Yeah. And the reason they're amazing is really? Because he's got a vision. Oh yeah, you have to see them. They're incredible. Okay. And it's because he has understanding of light.
Mm-hmm. I see. Building your style, which is a big topic, and for some people it's more important than for others, and it's arguably one of those things you should work on. And I feel like oftentimes, it's a long way, and you shouldn't have. It's really difficult to have one style throughout your whole life, since your personality changes as well over time, and that obviously reflects on what you do. But I often see when you have a very specific style, like LaChapelle or Platon, when it comes to portraits. In a sense, you're limiting yourself as well. Like you found something you love and that works for you, and you sort of just do it again and again, right? And just the subject changes, right? So in a way, it's more monotonous that way, right? It has its own beauty.
Yeah, I definitely saw that, from photo editing too, where there were certain people you only thought of for very specific jobs. And as the career as a photographer has changed, I think to some degree, some of those guys get left behind. Mm-hmm. And particularly in the last few years where, it's harder and harder to stay in business on your own, and, throw in pandemic and all the other stuff. I saw a lot of photographers go out of business. And I think it's because they were so niche. Yeah. You have somebody like Platon who's amazing, and you're hiring him for the Platon look, exactly. Right? And then you have people that are hired because there's an aspect to the job that can't be solved by the person who's hiring. Yeah. So they bring you in as a jack of all trades in terms of lighting, problem solving, all those things. And, I'm hoping that that's sort of where I fall in, because I'm not that guy with a certain look. And trust me, I struggled for a lot of years trying to show everything I do. Mm-hmm. And realizing that the world wasn't ready for that. They wanted, they wanted to put you in a box and say, this is what you do. And that was it. And that was very much a mentality when I lived in New York. And that was exactly my constant struggle. I would fight against it way upstream. Mm-hmm. And nowadays I would say that it's a little bit easier because, my job this weekend, for example, they need product shot as well as a celebrity. And, they just got both in one guy rather than have to hire two separate photographers. They just got it in one guy.
Okay. That's rare.
So experience from, 25 years ago when I photographed that book stuck, and the ability to light a product is, I would say is probably even harder than portraits to some degree.
Like it's Way
you know, way hard.
hard.
So, am I the greatest still life photographer? No, but can I get the job done and done well? Yes. I feel confident that I could do that because, again, it comes back to lighting. If you understand lighting, you understand the story that you're trying to tell, you can use that light to help tell that story and get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like to always see this topic that divides right between two kinds of artists really in general, those who go very niche, very specific, and those who stay wide, so because they're capable of doing all these things, and I call them they're hammers and they are Swiss knives, right?
Sure.
They're both good at what they do.
Yeah.
Just one is much more versatile than the other one.
Definitely.
Okay. No, and what I realized as well is, you were labeled very early on as a photo editor, and then you had to, because you wanted to, right, rebrand yourself as a photographer. So people, change the label on you because people just tend to put you in some kind of box.
100%. And there was a period of time too where, people knew me as a photo editor. And at that time, photo editors, there was probably 3 photo editors who were also photographers, and that's it. And now there's many more. A lot of photo editors become photo editors because they're photographers, and maybe they just sort of landed in this position while they're still working on their photography career, or they do both, or a lot of magazines and, companies now hire a photographer because they want an in-house photographer. Whereas that stuff didn't really exist in the late 90s and early 2000s when I was doing that. Sure. And, there is always this aspect that I sort of, and again, you can believe whatever you tell yourself. That I very much know that that's a reality, which, is good and bad, but to a certain degree, but my belief was really that you either get me or you don't. Mm-hmm. And it frustrates me at the same time that it drives me. So there was definitely people who I came across in New York who knew me from the photo editing circle, and we're like, nah, you can't be a photographer too. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You can't. We don't believe you can be both.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's an ego thing. I don't know if it's like, too much about what I do, and I don't want to hire you and have you second guessing how I produce a photo shoot. Mm-hmm. Who knows? I always thought it was an asset to be aware of what goes into a production of a photo shoot, and to also be able to pick up the camera and set the lights and all that stuff. So I just chose to ignore those who didn't get me and focus on those who did. And, fortunately there was enough to keep me going and still go. Mm-hmm.
I mean, digging a little bit, more into your work and how you do things is one, a big question I want to throw at you. It's a bit general, but what makes for you, a good portrait?
I think I'll answer that in saying a good photograph instead of just a good portrait. Mm-hmm. But a good photograph is something I think that makes you look at it for more than a second. And think about today in a world where we spend most of our time doing this, right? Yeah, we're thumbing through image after image after image. We're constantly bombarded with information. And because of that, it's really hard to stand out, I think. But if somebody is sitting here doing this, meaning scrolling their thumb up and down, if you're just listening and not watching, and they pause, then you've done something successful.
Yeah.
And I'll admit that even sometimes I'll be going through Instagram and I'll pause at an image and then really look at it and see that it's crap, but something in the image stopped me. So then, it goes down to eye of the beholder and all the other things that go into play. But I think arresting images are always going to be arresting images. And it goes back to what I was speaking about earlier in terms of those masters of photography. Their images are still successful today. And, it's what the viewer responds to. And I think as a whole, our sort of engagement with imagery often comes down to that same old thing that I'm going to say, which is lighting.
Mm-hmm.
So if the lighting is great, then the photograph can be great.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's a landscape or a portrait or a dog portrait or a baby, whatever it is, if the lighting or the feel or the mood of the image evokes something and has a response, then it's a successful image. I don't like talking about images in a certain way. I'd rather the images speak for themselves. There's a great line that I always paraphrase that says, great images need no more than 10 words to describe it. And the idea is that you really shouldn't be saying, well, this is a great photograph because ... Mm-hmm. It's more like, it's just a great photograph. And what you take from it is different than what I take from it. Mm-hmm. And 10 other people are going to have their opinion of it.
Yeah.
But altogether, we're all 12 of us are responding to something in that image that speaks to us, whether it's sadness, happiness, anger, whatever it evokes, it hits us in a way that it stands out.
Okay, I see. I just had to think of, I've had the experience so there are many different ways of consuming images. Nowadays, it's mainly through screens and single images, which is really not how it used to be, right?
Correct.
So, obviously, photography has evolved or adapted to that, right? To how it's consumed nowadays. But I feel like what makes an image great, and sure, it includes what you just said, but it might also be the format. Like, is it digital or is it in print, right? Physically, I think that changes everything. Like,
definitely. A backlit image almost always looks good
on a print, right? Like,
if it's here's the thing, you're getting light. You're getting light through the back, and that's kind of what I was alluding to with regards to that pause at the image in Instagram. People have filters like crazy now, right? So they might just pop a filter or a preset in Lightroom onto an image, and all of a sudden it's epic, But then if you really look at it and really digest the image, you can see it's absolute crap, and it's the filter or it's the preset that actually is making the difference. Mm-hmm. So it has to be taken with a grain of salt. And I talk about this a lot too, where when we shot film and everything was print from a negative or a chrome converted over, our eyes were very used to seeing that. Mm. And now that we have HD televisions and high resolution digital files and these amazing differences in technology, our eyes are now used to that. So if you go back and look at, there's Harry Benson's famous image of the Beatles having a pillow fight. If you go in, it's not the sharpest image in the world. Yeah. It's crisp because he did have a flash go off and all that, but it's got grain from the film that changes it quite a bit. So from this distance, it looks crisp and sharp, but if you walk in real close, you see that there's some pretty wide grain in that. Mm. He's in a hotel room with one small light. Whereas, we can jack up these ISO in a camera now and get away with, I say get away with, but we can really get away with shooting something that we couldn't do necessarily on film without pushing it 4 stops. And then it just falls apart because the grains separate and all that. And now we have, these controls in Photoshop and Lightroom to tighten up that grain and smooth out all these things. So, as our eyes get used to these things, it sort of changes the way our brain interprets these images. Mm. And I love to do this exercise. I actually, say this all the time. When I used to be in New York and I'd be in the subway, I used to sit and look for Photoshop errors in movie posters, right? Oh. And find them all the time. The other thing I find all the time is like chromatic aberration, on the edge of images when you see, magenta and green and all that mess. And whoever worked on it didn't fix it. I would always amuse me for some reason. If you go and you look at, movie posters sometimes and this or that, you're going to find things that really are ways of getting around. I mean, people always show those, Photoshop errors on, Kim Kardashian's butt and things like that go down there. I don't know how much they do that where you live, but it's huge here. But so, it's just one of those things where, our brains are so subject to whatever we're constantly being bombarded with. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it used to be a different thing. You used to go to a museum or a gallery to look at this work. And now you can just go on a website and make your judgments from that, from a screen that's backlit where it's much better. Whereas a good print versus a bad print, amazing paper versus not so amazing paper, all those things. And, look at magazines today, that the thin paper and, no matter how great the photograph, sometimes it just prints like mud, it just looks awful. So these are all things that are part of it. And I think to a degree, because it's gotten so dumbed down with the filters and the presets and all those things, I think a lot of people don't know, say, what a good image is made of, because now they've been told, well, just pop this filter and everything's smooth. Now it's good to go and it looks great. But if you really went in, you see that, oh my God, they have no pores, they have no separation between the hair on their eyebrows, like you realize that these are not really images the way that they could be.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the difference between, photographers need to train their eyes and need a lot of experience to know what a good image is, because it is not easy. Right. And because you need some specific dedication and training and experience with that to figure it out. And people don't realize most people are not photographers, like, professional photographers in that sense. Nowadays.
No, everyone is a photographer. That's what this has done. It's made everyone a photographer. This is the problem. Yeah.
And we are just bombarded with imagery, right, of all sorts, and we have a hard time figuring out, okay, what's good and what's bad. And to the untrained eye, which is not, that's a good question. How do you train your eye? Because looking through all kinds of images on your phone isn't really training you. So there got to be another aspect that gives you that.
Yeah, one of the large things that has occurred in the last couple of years. I have a lot of friends from college, let's say, whose kids are a bit older, might be in college now. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, my son or my daughter is a photography student. Mm-hmm. Let me send you their Instagram page, check it out, whatever. And because I've put that, I don't know if you have the 10,000 hours saying where you're from, but this mentality that, you put 10,000 hours in and then you know your job
or something.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I've put in the 100,000 hours of looking at images, right? I was a photo editor for X number of years. I was looking at all these portfolios. I was sucking in as much as possible because I really wanted to understand the difference between a great photographer and how to look at a portfolio and extrapolate from it without even meeting the person, whether they're a good photographer or not. Mm-hmm. And failing a lot, hiring a photographer who absolutely couldn't do the job, but their work was amazing, but they had zero personality. They couldn't handle the interaction with the celebrity, or they couldn't handle the delicacy of the kidney donor or all these things. Right. Mm-hmm. And, even in myself being, I was actually quite shy and I didn't like doing portraits. I liked sort of street photography, if you want to, or travel photography where, you're a fly on the wall. I mean, I shot the twin lens camera so that I could be looking down like Vivian Maier or something and not interacting directly with a person. But now I'm right in people's faces all the time. And I had to train myself to be better at that. And so, these friends, let's call it, send me their son or daughter's, portfolio or Instagram page. And it's literally the same images that I saw when I was in college.
Mm.
You know, the icicles on the side of the building, the dog, you know, the person sitting on the park bench, you know, and they think it's these amazing pictures.
Yeah.
But I literally have seen that picture 50,000 times, you know, at this point. And that I think is a big point of what you're talking about, where when you're inexperienced with imagery and you take an image, you think you've taken something original, when the reality is it's probably been done before and 10 times over, especially at that age. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. That's where you start the training. You know, that picture of the guy on the park bench who looks sad, or the homeless person, or whatever it is, you know, that's been done 1,000 times.
Yeah. That's
part of this, you know, the journey that you're on. You're not going to come right out the gate and be this amazing photographer, right?
I'll be the Picasso right.
So you got to work. Yeah. Like anything else, you have to work at it. It's training a muscle. Yeah. It's like an athlete, you know, you can't be a great golfer. Yes. You can have a natural, inclination to being a great golfer, but you got to put that work in. You got to train for it. Nobody just comes right out the gate and just gets a hole in one. You have to train for that. And I think photography is the same thing. Yes. You can have a great eye. You can have a vision. You can have all these things. But then, and this is the mistake that was, you know, talking about the trends, you know, there was this period where influencers were being hired by art buyers and photo editors because they had, you know, 10,000 plus followers on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
That year, I can't tell you how many assignments I got that they first hired an influencer and they failed at the job because they had no set experience. They had no ability. You know, yes, their Instagram page was amazing of all their friends, you know, partying, this, that, whatever.
Yeah.
Great pictures. And then they put them in a studio in an environment they have to create versus one that they just happened to be at where all the right things fell in place.
Yeah.
And they had no idea what to do. Whereas I trained for that. I trained to be put in a white box or a black box and create something. And there's a big difference.
Yes, clearly. One thing I've come to realize is most, you know, young upcoming photographers, me myself, I did this wrong as well. We try to be original rather than good. And you should, especially in the beginning, do it the other way around. Try to be good, not to be original.
See, I think I was too stupid to even try to do that. I just tried to be good right out the gate.
Oh, really?
I really wanted to. I did. I really wanted to understand. I didn't intend it. It was completely unintentional. But I would look at, you know, someone like Albert Watson and say, I want to do that. I need to know how to do that. You know, Avedon, for example, a lot of people didn't know this back then, but Laura Wilson was his assistant. She just happens to be the mother of Owen Wilson and Luke Wilson, the actors, right? It's just a weird coincidence.
Okay.
But Laura did a very obscure book on her travels with Avedon in the West, which is my favorite series, like, of all time, right? And again, this tied in perfectly because I just happened to post something about this today on Instagram. But so it's top of mind. But when I got my hands on that book, I got to see how Avedon did those series of portraits. And back then, there was no BTS. Nobody was looking at Instagram for BTS. The web didn't even exist at that time in the way that it exists now. And when I got to see, oh, that's how he did it. Now I got to try it. And then I started to try it and I started to build it into something that I was doing. And then take an Albert Watson. I was fortunate enough when I worked at GQ to literally, in the first year I worked there, I got to go down to his studio for a photo shoot. And he was shooting David Bowie for GQ. And I always tell this story that everyone in the office was super jealous that I was going to meet David Bowie. And I'm like, forget David Bowie. I'm going to meet Albert Watson, you know? And literally I shook hands with David Bowie. I said, thank you so much for doing the shoot today. You know, it's nice to meet you. And then I'm like, so Albert, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like asking him all these questions. And I just, you know, being able to sit there and watch him work and understand how he did what he does, you know, he recently came out with a book about sort of his mentality and behind the scenes and all that other stuff. None of that existed in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I was fortunate that I got to be on set and witness some of these things. And that's part of that training. I bought, some equipment and failed 1,000 times before I figured things out. But a lot of it was built from, trying to just absorb this idea of how does this work? And this is another great segue for us is that much of my training comes from the sun. And when I do lighting lectures, this is what I talk about all the time, that I spent so much time, and I still do it today, where I just pay attention to the natural world. What is the sun doing on a bright sunny day? What is the sun doing on a cloudy day? How does the sun appear when it bounces off this building, this surface? What is this light condition? How can I recreate that in a studio environment? How can I emulate this feeling, this mood? Because that's what lighting is. Lighting creates a mood, right?
Yeah.
So I still do this today. I mean, driving in my car, having my arm on the windowsill, the light hits the mirror bounces back and hits my forearm. And that highlight is amazing. I love that highlight. How can I recreate that highlight in a studio? What material is going to render that feeling, that kind of quality of light? And that's still what I do today. And so a lot of my lighting training is informal. It came from this idea of what does the sun do in these conditions, and how can I recreate that and use that to my advantage? That goes back to that bag of tricks. And that's really where a lot of that lighting stuff comes from.
Maybe you can think of like some of the major mistakes you have seen yourself do throughout your career that you notice, okay, this needs fixing, or you replace it with how it's done properly.
I think you have to make mistakes.
Sure.
I'll put it to you that way. I think that mistakes are how we learn. Okay. So, examples could be going into a photo shoot thinking, okay, I'm going to light this person this way, and then realizing that it's just completely wrong for their face, and then not having another solution when it doesn't work. Okay. I mean, our subjects are, when you're dealing with portraits, you're dealing with a personality. So that personality might not like what you think is the way you want to light them.
Yeah.
So you light them and they hate it, or the art buyer hates it, or the photo editor hates it, and then what do? If that's the only lighting style that you have, then you're kind of screwed, right?
Yeah.
So again, that goes back to that mentality of I have a bag of tricks, and if this thing doesn't work, then I'm going to change it. I'm going to move this light from here to here and change this feeling. I'm going to use a different modifier. I'm going to do these things. So, the errors are countless.
Okay.
Checking your lights under the plane instead of taking them on the plane. They don't show up. What are you going to do? There's certain things that you just, live and learn. There are certain things that you'll never do again. There's certain things, well, it was the luck of the TSA agent that didn't like the look of your equipment. Like all these things can happen, of course, but you have to experience these things.
Okay, no, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I just did a job in November and we got down to the Dominican Republic, no problem. And came back, and the Homeland Security guy just didn't like the looks of my assistant for some reason. And next thing I know, our equipment's spread out on the table and he's kind of giving us crap left and right. And it's, there's certain things that you think you're going to avoid. And then you hit these potholes in the road, and what are you going to do? So I wouldn't even bother telling you a specific failure. I'll tell you that it's great to fail all the time. It's part of learning. You're not going to win every game. You're not going to have a home run every time. This is part of the reality. You have to have very thick skin to be a photographer. You're not going to please every viewer of your work. Yeah. This is the reality.
Okay. Looking through all these well-known faces you have portraited. I've wondered because they're all very different in a way. Some of them are inside in the studio, some of them are outside on location, some of them are moody, some of them are more lighthearted. So you got a bit of everything. And I was wondering how you plan for each individual person. How do you decide that, for example, for Morgan Freeman, you want him to be on a plane looking down?
Sure. It comes from the idea of the assignment. Okay, so most of my work is assignment photography, right? That said, often it's through questions. So Morgan Freeman just happened to be for a private jet magazine, so that's why a plane was involved with him. However, the challenge of that shoot was that we didn't have any lighting equipment, because that was the look of the magazine. Everything was always natural light. So I had to request from him what time of day we were going to be shooting so that I could get the light that I wanted and control that scenario. Living in California, I can't tell you how many times I have to shoot at noon. It's like this weird thing that like publicists, they always agreed to a photo shoot happening at noon. And it's a big challenge. You always want to be thinking in your head, like, we're going to get, sunrise or sunset or magic hour, all these things. And you don't always get that option. Or, you get sent to an office and say, oh, we have this super high ceilings and these amazing offices you can use. And then you get there and they have huge high ceilings, but there's air ducts going all along the lower part of the ceiling. So you really only have 8-foot ceilings, so like these are things that happen that are real. I approach every shoot by asking a lot of questions. I try to get as much information as I can going in. And then I use that information basically trying to seek out keywords. And those keywords are what I'm looking for. Something that evokes an emotion. And once I know that, then I know how I want to light it. So in the case of, let's say that kidney donor that we're talking about, then I know that the story is about this. And this was a real story. It was a daughter who decided to give her kidney to her father to save his life. Right. So I'm not going to light her the way that I'm going to light, Steven Tyler, a rock star. Yeah. I'm going to light her with a soft light, something that evokes an emotional quality to the image that helps push that story forward. Quite often, when I was in New York working for that media company, they had 3 business magazines. We would get maybe 2 minutes with a lot of these people. They are harder to shoot than celebrities. First off, they don't like being in front of the camera. Second off, time is literally money to them. So they do not want to give you a lot of time. And they're kind of boring, They're just not always that interesting. Well, some of them are amazing, big personalities, but so many of them are guys who just, sit behind a desk and have a great brain for finance. So we approach that whole magazine as these are the rock stars of the industry. So we're going to light them like rock stars. So we approach that intentionally with this sort of like like what you would see in a Rolling Stone, but in a business magazine, to push something that may be a little bit vanilla and put some spice to it, So I really would say that the answer to the question is that I approach each and every shoot as an individual shoot. It's not going to be the same look as the last one. Am I repeating looks? Of course, because those are all good solutions. But I'm really looking at each shoot individually and saying, what is the emotion that I'm trying to get across on the shoot? And how can I light it in a way or use natural light in a way that helps push that story forward? Okay. So I guess sometimes you get more creative freedom than others, depending on probably who it is. Yes, for sure. I mean, advertising obviously can be very, very specific, right? Yeah. But I would say another thing that I learned as I got older in my career is really this idea that, you're hiring me for a reason. Yeah. Because you see something in my work that says it gives you confidence that I can get the job done. So I in turn have to have that confidence that you're hiring me to come up with that solution for you. If you don't have a specific look, I mean, most of the editorial work that I do these days, it's not really directed as much. There are a number of creative directors and photo editors who still give you quite a bit of direction for a photo shoot. But nowadays, especially with COVID, they're not on set. So they're calling you and saying, okay, we're going to send you to this location. You got to come up with something that works for this magazine. Or you got to come up with something that works with this idea of this advertisement that we're doing or whatever the case is. So having that sort of self-confidence that what I do is what they're hiring.
Mm.
So I just need to come up with something that's great for them.
Okay. Yeah.
And that took me a long time. It took me a long time to believe that, because I was always trying to just do the safe thing, do the approach that was good, but not necessarily great. And I sat stagnant for a little bit during that period of time.
Mm.
And when I was questioning why am I sitting stagnant, I think I realized, you know what, they're responding to the work that I have done without somebody telling me what to do.
Mm.
So I just need to go and be confident that that's why they're calling me. They want me to do my thing.
Yeah. All right. So do you think that was more of like a psychological thing with yourself that you had to overcome in a way?
Definitely. Yeah. There's definitely a very tight correlation between psychology and photography. Goes back to what I'm talking about with lighting, how, I'm pushing a story because I'm trying to train your brain psychologically to look at something the way that I want you to look at it. I'm trying to push a story. And I think the failures and the successes as you go on in your career, it's not going to be an overnight thing. There is a time element to all of this stuff. And through that experience, you start to get to a place where you see what works and what doesn't. Mm. And then you take your risks here and there, but sometimes you play it safe, so these are all from experience, and then even knowing the client, My goal is always to have repeat clients. So if I have a client that I know likes a certain style that I do, I'm going to keep doing that. Maybe I'll push it a little bit and say, oh, I did this as well, and see if they respond to it. And if they don't, then I back up to where they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. So it's reading people. There is a lot of people reading, not just as a photographer, but I mean, think about it. I love this idea that photographers are just taking pictures all the time. No, it's like 10% of the time. Mm-hmm. The rest is paperwork. The rest is, marketing. The rest is, running your business. Yeah. Photo editing. I mean, retouching, as we say, and, doing, building your portfolio, keeping your Instagram page up, like all of these things are really what you spend most of your time doing, and actually pressing a button is a lot smaller.
Yeah, it's what people see, and it's that peak of the iceberg, right? So this famous image. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
How does creativity come in play in all of this for you?
So I think that's something that has come with time, and it goes to what we were just talking about, where you have a shoot here and there where your creativity really was able to shine. And then it got to this point where it's like, you know what, these people are hiring me to be creative, so I should be creative. Mm. And it goes a lot into that mentality of how I go in with a plan. I keep this notebook. I've done this my whole career where, I have this notebook where, I have all my shoots in, planned out, and then I put this, stuff. And I
can show you mine right now.
Great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't see this coming, but
I'm glad you got it. Not a lot of people do. A lot of people take the idea after I've shown it to them, but if you can see on the camera, like I draw out my sets, schemes.
Love it.
Yeah. This has been my whole career. I've done this. I still do it today. Not that I necessarily need it, but it's because
it helps.
It serves a lot of, it does. It serves a lot of purposes. It's got my brain going in a certain place. And the creativity, it's because if you can imagine it, then you can kind of push it forward. I mean, I told you I played soccer for a long time. Yeah. I had a coach who once told me, if you can picture the ball going into the net, then you're sort of training your brain as well as you've trained your body. Yeah. And before games, I would just I'm not a hippy dippy kind of guy, but I would get kind of zen in that place, and I would sort of picture the ball spinning and touching the net and the sound and all that stuff. And I was a striker. That was my job, was to score goals. So it definitely is part of that mentality. And I think there is a lot of analogies between athletics and your career, especially a career like photography, where it is a physical job. It is a mental job. And if you can foresee things happening, then you can anticipate and put yourself in a better position to succeed.
Definitely. This is a matter of focus, of visualization, right?
Yes.
It's like visualizing your goals, which is what most people do. And is such a strong instrument, such a strong habit, that sets you on course, helps you to like, right.
Yeah.
What Ian just showed us is on video, if you're just listening to this, is a notebook full of ideas, pictures, references, lighting schemes, which is basically putting down where you want your lights and in which direction you want them, and how wide they're spreading their light, how soft and hard, and all those things, right? Putting down the ratios, photography things. And it immediately remind me of my one, which is a lot smaller.
It's not the size that counts, like they say, right?
Not like an A6 in my hand. But it's the same thing. If I can show this just to you right now, it's just all kinds of
Love
different things you see online, things you like, and start to understand them yourself. It's we talked pre-podcast, about you being on the show where you make a deep dive breakdown of a single image. So that is such an helpful thing you can do, like a technique. You have to do like 2-hour breakdown, but you can print out, it's important to print out things sometimes, and really understand, why does that picture look like how it looks like.
Well, so what I do in my book is that's all my work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I take things in my phone. I heard musicians talking about this, where they might hear a tune in their head and they'll sing it in their phone. And I thought that was a good way to do it. So if I see something on Instagram, or I see something online or whatever, I'll do a screenshot of it and I keep it in an inspiration album on my phone. Mm-hmm. And it's really good because quite often if a client and I are, let's say we're texting back and forth about the shoot, and they're saying, oh, I want to do a shoot at the beach, and I had this idea, and they'll send me a picture, and then I'll go to that album on my phone and I'll pull 7 images, boom, send it right off to them. So I keep this ongoing. So whenever I do have those images as I'm scrolling that stop me and arrest my attention, mm-hmm. I will look at that and say, okay, I'm going to screenshot that and put it in a inspiration folder. And it's something that I want to do. Something I tell people when they're working on their portfolios or their websites often is to look for those holes in their portfolios and website, things that they feel could help cohesively tell what they're capable of doing to the viewer. Mm-hmm. If there's no words, if there's no conversation, for somebody who maybe sees one of your images in a magazine and then Googles you and then ends up on your Instagram page or ends up on your website, having the sort of foresight of saying, well, I've got portraits of all these people, but I'm not showing this. And so I need to go and shoot this, and how important it is to be self-aware of the sort of assignments that you make for yourself that help drive your career forward, as opposed to just taking in what assignments come at you from art buyers, magazines, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I like it. I was just got surprised. That's all.
I'm here to surprise you. Yeah.
It was just that, I didn't see it.
Well, I'm a big believer in personal work, and I try to have a personal project going at all times. There's certainly breaks in between, but I usually have something I'm working on for, anywhere from 1 to 3 years at a time. Because one, I can't ever sit still. And, as we know, there are times that are going to be slow. I mean, during the pandemic, I did an entire portrait project that pushed my photography in a certain direction that I never took it. And I never used to light like this. I never used to shoot at this aperture. And I did it on purpose to push myself. I always want to push myself. And so I'm always sort of this mindset that having personal work is one of those things that checks a lot of boxes. Quite often, advertising art buyers, they want to see your personal work. They want to know what your vision is. And yet they still hire you for the very boxed in shot, but that's okay because they love looking at that stuff. Yeah. Right. Whereas a lot of my editorial assignments are a lot of creative freedom. Photo editors today are hiring me and they're saying, okay, here's your subject's phone number. Here's the date they're available. You're available too. Great. Go ahead and call them and get it set up. Whereas when I was photo editing, it was like, I arranged everything. All the photographer had to do was show up and have my direction of what I was hoping they would do. So given that there's a lot more interaction with the subject, there's a lot more creativity on how I'm going to approach the job. And again, these are great places where I can shoot the safe image that I've shot, which got me the job in the first place. But then I can push it and I can try some other stuff. I can be more creative. I can try a different lighting style that I want to try. And, that's where a lot of that creativity, to answer your question, comes in, I think.
Yeah. I see that. No, I had to think of the keynote we were talking about as well. I think that's something we could easily implement right now and maybe have a look at that.
Sure.
So basically Ian has like let's call it idea show. An old school one.
Philosophy. Let's call it a philosophy.
the one
I think I think what this probably does, it kind of addresses a lot of what we have just been talking about, the philosophy behind my work, and with some real examples, because at the end of the day, not everybody wants to hear us talk. They probably want to look at some pictures too.
I'm certain. Photographers are very visual driven people. So if you can, I would suggest you go to YouTube and check for this last
one. Please do. Yeah. Please
do you need any
so do you want me to share my screen?
Or you can do it.
Let's see. Just enable participant screen share.
I think I did now. Check now.
Yes. All right.
Nice.
Good. Sure, get the right one. Okay.
All right. Here we are.
And I'm going to hit play here. There we go. There you go.
You even got a presentation just for us.
Just for you guys, yes. Never did this before. Yeah, I'm just kidding. All right, so this is it in a nutshell. Okay, this is what I say all the time. How much lighting drives what I do. This is what I have said that I figured out is the cohesive thread. If you understand my work or you appreciate my work, then what you see is that there's a lighting that changes all the time. I use a lot of different styles of lighting, but really what I'm doing is taking lighting as a way to direct what you see in the image, what the portrait is, what the action is, whatever's going on.
Okay.
So my work kind of splits, in that thought process of people wanting to stick you in a box, right? I literally have shot nearly every subject at some point or another. I've done still life. I've done travel. I did portraits, fashion, documentary style, all those things. But really where I started to look over time was, here I am from one side of the spectrum to the other. And as time went on, that assignments that came in, because I am a commercial photographer, started to narrow in a bit closer to the middle. And the two areas that I mostly work are portrait and fitness. So I kind of put this together to showcase that stuff.
Yeah.
And the way that I look at it is that this sort of covers the gamut of what you could constitute as my style, if you want to put it that way.
Which you just saw a picture of Steven Tyler.
Steven Tyler, yeah. This is an actress called from Harrison. Yeah, this actress called Andrea Bordeaux, Morgan Freeman, who you mentioned. And again, now you see what I was talking about as far as dictating the time of day to get that light exactly where I wanted it.
Quite a harsh lighting going on there.
Yeah, that's a very hot Mississippi day.
Yeah. He looks like,
but
but it's way too hot for me to be outside, right?
It is way too hot. Yes, yeah, for sure. It definitely was. A very humid summer day. But what you can extrapolate from this image is that this is the same as I would light it if I was lighting it.
I see.
So I'm using the sun at a certain time of day in order to predict that this is where it's going to be, and here's how I'm going to shoot. And then in situations where I'm inside and I'm controlling it, again, what I'm hoping is that there's a line that's drawn from the stuff that's in the natural world to the stuff that's inside studio. And when it's a combination of the two, that was the director of producer of Stranger Things.
Yeah. Okay. That's why you got that little figure there.
Yeah. The little gourmet god or whatever those things are called. Actress, Kevin Smith. Actually, this is I think she's Danish actress, singer, musician, Nina Bergman, she's called.
Well, this is rare because you don't usually see that much backlight,
So this was actually shot at my house during the pandemic. I was working on a project of motorcycle riders that I did. It's on my website if you want to look. It's called Moto.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
And so she happens to be a motorcycle rider. And when I got connected with her and she agreed to shoot, she said, well, I have a friend who's a stylist, just happens to be a guy who styles on the side, but he works on Westworld, the HBO show. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So she was like, if we can do some stuff for me and I'll shoot the motorcycle stuff for you. And so we kind of traded there,
right.
But this is shot at my house. And so it's quite a challenge, but definitely a different style for me, but I was playing off the clothing, a futuristic kind of look and sort of this like ice queen was sort of an idea that just kind of happened. Jeff Daniels, the actor.
I love also the sorry on Jack Dan.
Jeff Daniels
got this extra depth on the background as well.
So this is actually shot in a very tiny green room at a hotel and tiny ceilings, which is why I had everybody sit down for the shoot. But what I did was I used 2 X drops from Westcott, which are these sort of portable backgrounds that they make, and I layered them so that I would create that shadow to try to give the impression of more depth, but it literally is right behind him. It just looks further because of that shadow. And a lot of people have asked me about that shadow and said, why didn't you just have a straight background? I could have just, paired them together and done it that way, but I did want to create some depth. And of course, nobody knows that we're in this tiny room unless I tell them or they see a behind the scenes picture or something. But the reality is I just felt like it worked. So it was just something I came up with.
Definitely. I mean, you have, basically it's 2 backgrounds, right? Just slightly off distance, right? So it's one.
Exactly.
And it gives it more depth. Like if it would be a plain background, it would be so much more boring.
So I use that same mentality in this one. I use 3 of them in this case. And so there's one right behind him, and then the other 2 are set back a couple inches just to create those shadows.
Could be the wall too, right?
Yeah. could be. Yeah, it could be whatever you think. Yeah. All right. Speaking of pen, this is where that inspiration always comes. And again, this is on location. This isn't in a proper studio. This is at the lobby of the building that this actor lives. He's on. He's on a bunch of shows right now, but I think he's What We Do in the Shadows, and I think there's a new show on Amazon called Reacher that he's in, and I think he was in a bunch of Disney TV shows and such.
I see. So that was basically just that infamous picture from Evan Peng, like into the corner.
The corners. Yeah. Yeah. I love the corner. I do it. Yeah, I do it all the time. It's a favorite of mine. So I do create that a lot.
Like this one from, I don't know his name, his actor.
Bob Odenkirk.
Oh yeah. So it's the guy, like, I feel like most people don't know his real name, but it's the guy from Better Call Saul, or like the lawyer from Breaking Bad. And when I saw this picture on your website, this was my favorite picture.
Oh, thanks.
It's the background is like, did that happen to be there, or did you put it there?
No, this was again during the pandemic. A lot of the assignments that I was getting, I had to shoot alone, which was quite a change of pace. I normally have at least one assistant, but because of the way things are, we have to get COVID tested before the shoot. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these actors or the publicists are requesting that we literally just shoot in the actor's backyard or a hotel room or whatever the case is going to be. So this is at his home in Los Angeles. Okay. And it's really funny because I had 3 setups for the shoot. It was for Backstage Magazine. And we did all 3. And when I had walked in, I saw this and I really liked it. It was off in a corner against the wall. And I kind of made a mental note that I liked it. And if I had time, I would ask. But I told him when I met him, these are the 3 setups I need to do. This is what the magazine asked me for. I'll try to be as quick as possible. I pre-set up everything. So literally he just walked out of his house, went from set 1 to set 2 to set 3. This was my way of being efficient. Again, I planned it out.
Yeah.
And when I finished the 3rd shot, I said, okay, well, that satisfies what the magazine needed. Is there anything else you want to do? I had a couple of ideas, but if there's something you might be interested in, I don't want to take any more of your time, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I really love this corner of his backyard. And I said, that's amazing. I have a shot in mind. Can you please just stand right here? Give me 2 seconds. I quickly ran and got my light from the first set, which was a small 24-inch rapid box beauty dish that is probably my favorite modifier that Westcott makes. Mm-hmm. And I said, just give me 2 seconds, put it in front. So just one light, it's mimicking natural light, but it's giving a little punch to it, which again, that's probably what I would constitute if you did put a thumbtack on me and say, what's your lighting style? And I said, natural with little punch is usually what I would say. So
I see. Little spice.
A little spice. And I actually sent him a print of this and got a really, really beautiful note back from him saying that he loved the way that it looked and it captured this aspect of him. And so, I'm always surprised if I hear back from somebody I sent a print to, but that was amazing to get that message from him. So he liked it as well. So I'm glad you picked this one.
I must have. Yeah. He's looking to the side, and in the background there's sort of like a art piece that is pointy, and it all points towards the center, like a sun, sort of. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it draws you into the center of the image like crazy, right?
All right, now I'm going to get embarrassed, so let's keep going. That's all right.
Okay.
I love to show this image because this is a good example of what I do on the regular. I often get assignments where I have to create something that you would see happening in reality, but we have, 2 minutes to do it or something like that. And I do a lot in the cigar industry, and we had an assignment. Mm-hmm. We had 72 hours on the ground with the lead guy from this cigar company. And this is something he would do. He would go in and he would inspect the tobacco field. But this was not at the time of day that it appears. It was probably in the middle of the day. So we used artificial light, to create the feeling that this was early morning or late day, and he's, doing his job, going through the field and inspecting the trees or the plants. Sorry. And, that's what I get hired to do, to recreate something that happens when it's not happening. And so, yes, would it have been ideal if we were there at the end of the day and the sun was setting or first thing in the morning and he's doing his walk through the field? Fantastic, great. But not the reality when you have 72 hours on the grounds and you have a huge, tremendous shot list to get through and all that stuff. That's part of being a commercial photographer. You know, I would have loved it if I spent 3 weeks down at the farm and just was able to capture this stuff naturally, but there was just no way to do it.
Oh, I see.
Another one of my favorites, because this was an assignment where my subject didn't want to be showing his face necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted portraits of him, but not his face.
Wow. That's odd.
And yeah, well, he's a songwriter, and he's a songwriter, which means he's behind the scenes. He's not necessarily the guy in front. Yeah. So he does a lot of work in the country music world, and these singers who get all the credit, you know, he's in the byline. Mm. So this was a way to do a portrait of somebody without necessarily showing their face, which is, again, great challenge. We actually went out to the desert. We had this plan of going to this dry lake bed that I'd found, and we did a bunch of shots there as well. But on the way, we kind of said, let's play this really loose. If we just see something, let's just pull off the road and shoot. And so I had a blast on the shoot with him. I've photographed him since then as well, doing more of a, you know, classic portraits, but this was really fun to do. So, you know, I always pull this image. So fitness work is the other area. I do a lot of stuff, less and less for magazines these days, because the magazines are kind of gone away as of late. So nutrition companies, that kind of stuff is usually where it falls into more now. Yeah. And again, it's something I sort of always say. At the end of the day, I'm a portrait photographer. That's what I would consider myself. Mm-hmm. And whether it's an athlete doing something athletic, the kidney donor, the celebrity, the musician, whatever it is, it comes down to lighting, and it comes down to creating a lighting that helps push that story, as I keep kind of driving home with you guys. Mm-hmm. And you know, the funny thing is, like, people think, oh, well, fitness photography, it has to be hard, high key lighting, blah, 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 blah. This is the same soft light that I used for the kidney donor. You know, it's just a big umbrella with diffusion, and that's it. And people, you know, sort of don't understand that, you know, for me, it's fun to just try all these different things. You know, how can I solve a photo shoot with one light when I got to follow this guy around the gym? You know, I had my assistant holding a light on a stick, mm-hmm. and literally I would just say, go to the left, go to the right, higher, down, up, whatever, you know, give me more angle, all these things. And it's fun for me to push these boundaries and try different things, you know, making somebody who is like muscular and strong look very soft and beautiful at the same time. These are, mm-hmm. you know, things that in the fitness world I've really come to enjoy, because these are the challenges that are presented to me, and it gives me more and more opportunity. You know, I got 3 seconds with this basketball player outside the gym after we finished the main shoot, and I saw like this sort of garage, sort of parking area, and I said, "Come here, can you just stand here?" 2 seconds, threw a ball at him. His friends started making fun of him. He looked over, smiled, boom, done, shot done. I said, "Thank you very much." So get out of here. Yeah. You know, other times I have, you know, more time, and I can create something that is, you know, more, you know, thought through, more processed, you know, and so exercising my brain in those, you know, two minutes or 10 hours, you know, it's like whatever I'll get, I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make the most out of it.
Absolutely. And as you can see, I changed that light a lot. Mm. But what I hope is that people understand that, you know, whether it's this way or this way, still the same guy.
That's what I'm saying.
So, you know, as I mentioned, personal work.
Yes.
So this is a part of a project I did called Right Next Door. I really could have kept going with it, but I'd moved and a lot of things were going on at the time. So I kind of stopped after about 3.5 years, but it was interesting people that live all around us that you have no idea how interesting their story is. Yeah. And so for this one, I taught myself video, this was sort of a vehicle for me to teach myself how to do video and sound as well. So I used it for that, and I interviewed the people. I have a friend who's an editor, and so I worked with him for writing stories about each person and telling their story. And one would lead to another. I would have ideas, and it would kind of promote this sort of mentality of getting this wide variety of subject matter. So if you go to my website, ianspanier.com, you'll see, the portraits and the stories are all there. And there's some great stories. I mean, this guy was one of the oldest jockeys who still rides horses. This was a separate portrait. I never actually got to interview for the story, but I was photographing him for something else. And I told him about the project and he liked it. And I said, I think you'd be a good addition to it. And he goes, well, what do you want to do? And I said, let's do something funny. And it definitely fit his personality. I said, what would you do? Because it was really hot that day. I go, what would you do if, your air conditioning broke and it's midsummer? He lives in Ojai, California.
Okay.
And he goes, I work in the nude. And I was like, let's do it. So
wow, what a moment.
Yeah. This was the motorcycle project that I was talking about. Very Platon. It's funny that you brought him up because it was very inspired, Platon sort of mixed with Albert Watson, if you want to put it that way. Yeah. I usually shoot a lot of images around f7.1, I would say. That's kind of my sweet spot.
Pretty far.
Yeah, but this was all f20. I mean, this was something different for me. A lot of light, 5 lights going, including the background, and really pushing the aperture. Doing something I don't normally do.
Is the hand in focus? It seemed like it was out of focus.
Yeah, it's just on the edge. On the edge. But, even just shooting like this sort of style, for me was very different. And so along with the challenge of creating a studio in my house during the middle of a pandemic, and I got, COVID compliance, class. So I could, operate the shoot in a way that the, is this environment was safe and all that stuff.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. So I shot it on a white background and then I remove it. And the reason I did it is that getting pure white in my house, it's just too close to my subject. So the kickback was a little too much. So I would shoot it on white, but I would ultimately remove them from that background so that I could get a pure white.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it. So, more on the website, more on Instagram, obviously.
Sure. I mean, you have also published 2 different books we haven't talked about, but like, I feel like we could like go on and on and on as well.
Yeah. I'm actually working on a book right now. I can tell you it's in the cigar industry. I can't tell you who and what it is this time, but it will be out 4th quarter of this year. It's going to be huge. It's pretty amazing. We are about halfway done with shooting, but they keep adding more stuff to me. But I'm about to go at the beginning of March on the next trip to shoot more.
Yeah. And
then I just came back from Michigan shooting some stuff. And it's going to be tremendous. So I'm really excited about it.
Ooh, nice. Can we just real quick go back to normal, no screen share?
Oh yeah, no share. You got it.
But I love that you brought this, that we have the opportunity to see some of your work right here as well. Brings so much value. And
thanks.
So just to have touched it. As far as I could have seen, you have this book like Cigar Lens, I think it was.
So that is a kind of compilation I put together of 3 years of working in the cigar industry.
Yeah.
For a magazine called Cigar Report, which went out of business during that recession that we talked about. A lot of the travel for that ended up yielding a book for Playboy, which was a guide to the cigar manufacturing, basically. So I've been to every country that manufactures cigars except for the Canary Islands and one in Central America. I can't remember which one, but pretty much all the countries I've been to, a boatload of factories.
You missed out on my hometown.
You know.
Come on.
I have not. I know. I was begging to go. Trust me, I wanted to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been to Spain, but not the Canary Islands. So that portfolio was really put together to sort of put me in a position when cigar clients contacted me, I could direct them, okay, here's some of my travel stuff. Because as I mentioned, I was a travel photographer for quite a while. And again, fighting that battle upstream, I had a whole portfolio section on my website for travel. But it's like, people were like, I don't understand who's showing up today on set. Is it the portrait photographer? Is it the fitness photographer? Is it the travel photographer? Is it still life photographer? So I really focused my website to primarily the portrait work and pushed even the idea that the fitness work is more on the portrait side, even though I do shoot instructional fitness, the breakdown of how to do exercise and all that kind of stuff. And this was a way for me to sort of sneak some travel in there. And so if somebody asks me, but a lot of I do travel work on, I sell a lot of it on a storefront online. So, I call it fine art, but it's really just travel pictures that I've shot over the years from the various countries and states I've been to.
Nice. And there's also local heroes, right? With the firefighters.
Yeah. So that was a book on American volunteer firefighters that I did. It was an idea that a friend of mine and I had. We went and photographed the fire department in my hometown, which is a really small town just north of New York City. And we took that to a publisher. They loved it and said, we want you to shoot it in different regions of the United States. So we went to the South, the Midwest, and then California. And between the 4 departments, we grabbed a writer. The writer interviewed everybody. And, primarily it was a photo book, but we wanted to include stories of the fire departments. And sort of, it was a discovery on the line that connects how people at a young age, say, I want to be a policeman, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a firefighter. And, who are these people that as adults chase that dream in a volunteer way? They're unpaid, they're underfunded, there's all this, socioeconomic aspects to it as well. And for us, we looked at them as heroes, so I wanted to photograph them in a heroic style. So all of those are on location, creating a white studio in some, and then shooting on location with the others.
Nice. I mean, when I read about it, I love the idea. I love the concept. I didn't manage to see any images itself, but
well, if you go to Amazon, you can actually thumb through the book a little bit. So it's called Local Heroes: Portraits of American Volunteer Firefighters.
Nice, love it. I mean, really, in the end, in the personal work projects, you really come to shine, who you really are as a photographer, in a sense.
I mean, that's the hope, of course. Thank you. But, it's the challenge of being it's a challenge of being a commercial photographer. Not everybody understands, I can't tell how many people ask me to shoot their kids or a wedding or things like that. It's just not what I do. Yeah. And, I make a joke, no weddings, no kids, no pets. That's kind of like my joke. Not that there's anything wrong with that as a career. It's just not what I do. I don't have the sort of mentality for it. I've tried it. I don't like it. Yeah. And, for me, I had a professor in college who was kind of annoyed with me for working at GQ and shooting, stuff commercially, because he's a fine art photographer. And, we would have respectful, disagreements about it, but, I always considered myself a commercial photographer. Yes, there was periods in my life where I carried a camera around all the time. But I don't now. I mean, I've got this now, obviously, but,
the phone.
I don't shoot. I don't shoot all the time. Yeah. it's funny because I see pictures that my mind is snapping pictures all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm just not always capturing, because I realize also having, these whirring computer archives, going up next to my computer here constantly, they fill up so quickly. All my storage units. And it's just the volume over a period of time. I mean, I've got hard drive after hard drive after hard drive after hard drive. I'm a big believer in backing up. So I have, backup, and I've got double backup, and, I keep some in New York still. They're all over the place, but, it is just an incredible amount of volume now that everything is digital.
Clearly. All right. So we are arriving at the end of this conversation. And before we hit it off, I would love to give you the opportunity to share with us maybe one or two thoughts or experiences, memories, whatever comes to your mind when it comes to talking to, the next generation of creative workers, and something you want to give them on their way.
Yeah. It's a pretty common question. I get that a lot. The biggest thing I can say is shoot. Mm-hmm. I used to quote my mentor, who is Harry Benson, the guy I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. He'd say, "Go buy a guitar."
What?
But I think the music industry.
Go buy a guitar.
No. Go buy a guitar. In other words, kick cans. Don't be a photographer. He didn't like. Yeah, because he doesn't like competition. He likes to beat. He likes to beat and get rid of everybody. So, okay. But I think the music industry might be worse off than the photography industry these days. So, I do. I've sort of adapted to shoot. And fail. I think failing is the most underrated aspect of success. I think if you learn to fail and figure out what works and what doesn't work, you will be better. You will become a better photographer.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, thank you. Simple and effective. I like that. If people want to check out your work, I mean, we have pretty much talked about it already, but real quick and simple, where people can check you out.
Sure. So, of course, there's my website, which is ianspanier.com. Spanier's tough to spell, I know. So it's Spanier. Yeah, good luck. Exactly. And Instagram, I'm pretty active there at Ian Spanier. I do post a lot about stories behind the picture, advice, thoughts, all that good stuff. As you mentioned earlier, I'm an ambassador for a number of products. So I do regular speaking engagements for B&H, Westcott. Westcott does some great how-to videos. We're actually about to film another one where you really get a deep dive into my thought process going into a shoot, how I light, what modifiers I'm going to use, what light I'm going to use, all those things. And then aside from there, just how to feature in Shutter Magazine. There's always things coming up. So if you follow me on Instagram, that's the easiest way to see when those things are happening, because I will post about them. And then, I throw up as much BTS as I can whenever I can, so that people can kind of get a sense. I'm very open book. I don't think there's anything wrong with sharing how I do something, how I did something. I'm not worried about somebody taking me out. It is what it is. Great.
That's probably why you're here too, right? Because if you would
I've heard that before. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what, this podcast is all about as well. It's about sharing, about learning, helping each other. So, you came to the right place, or I took you to the right place.
I like it.
No, but definitely that's something, my experience was I found some links on your website to some videos, some of them on YouTube, some of them on other platforms, and I love them.
Thank you.
I feel like every photographer loves, behind the scenes footage, and the photographer actually explaining what they're doing, in real life, in the action, right? With the model.
So I guess that means you get me then.
I get you, of course.
Yeah.
I hope.
There you go. Well, that's what I said. Remember, I said not everybody gets me, but
oh yeah, fair point. No, but I like that, and you should definitely check it out. See how it looks like for for a real client, and what is the good gear you can get out there once you get successful and manage to get there. So definitely check that out. And therefore, some of them are for free. I'm not sure if there are some that cost money, but
yeah,
there are some for sure. Some of them are just click and go.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Ian, for being with me. This has been
thank you.
A fun conversation. And any last words?
No, just thank you. I mean, I'm very happy to do this. I'm glad you reached out, and I hope this was helpful to somebody out there.
Yeah, for sure. At least it was for me. So
excellent.
Tick.
One person. That's all I needed. Check the box.
All right. Sweet. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been another exciting episode with a Creative Cast. I'm Lucas, and this was a Creative Cast.
I didn't get to see this guy.
Oh my God. I have to just include a few seconds of this dog. Yes. Oh, is that her? It looks.
I thought you might. It's a boy. Oh. It's just a poodle, so they all look like girls. But
okay.
He's nervous.
Look at those. Oh my God.
Yeah. So he's called Judge after the New York Yankees baseball player.
Oh, okay, Judge.
Yes.
Oh.
I heard him bark a couple times. I didn't think you heard it, so I thought that was good.
I didn't for sure.
Okay, good.
Been the best part of my life.